But technology can't end, so can it? Because it's a kind of race between bad actors. The moment you get some technological fix, somebody else comes up with a way around it.
Yes. I mean, what the fix is, I honestly don't really know, because unfortunately there's so often a push to say, well, people need to be educated, but they don't, because whatever you educate people to look for will become redundant, you know, a week or two later when it's no longer applicable.
There is a larger question, which is why does it really matter? I mean, the last 4 or 5 years have shown that people will believe things on the flimsiest possible evidence. They don't require detailed proof. And in fact, they'll believe things in the teeth of contrary evidence often.
Yeah.
So does it matter that AI is going to
I think it
add
does.
a tool?
I think it does, because I think actually when you lose a sense of shared reality and shared truth, you can go to a really quite scary place. And I look at, you know, to go back to the beginning, at what's happening in Putin's Russia now, and if people give up on the idea of there being true and not true, I think we end up in a really quite frightening position.
Any verifiable fact. I mean, it's part of the dread in the Silver Bone, isn't it? Yeah. You don't know what is true. It's interesting. Somebody comes back from the marketplace at one point, and it's the most solid piece of information that you get, because they're talking to each other while they're buying food, and you think they've got no reason to lie.
Yeah.
They're telling the truth.
Well, this was actually, in fact, actually, during the war, this is usually the main source of information, black market or some accidental gathering of people who are sharing the rumors, and then the rumors are edited and passed on.
It's terribly soluble though, isn't it? I'm remembering that early when the Russians invaded the second time round, and people in Ukraine rang their relatives in Russia and said, they're on the doorstep. They didn't believe them.
Yeah,
they didn't even believe their relatives.
People were calling and saying that we are under bombardment, we have our members of the family killed, and on the other side, the relatives were saying, you are not saying the truth, or it is necessary to do so for Russia.
Yes, it's always. I wanted to ask you all, but I think we've run out of time. There's such a large question. Whether we have actually diminished in trust, that will have to wait for another day, I'm afraid. Thank you to all of my guests. Charlotte Gee from MIT Technology Review, Andrei Kirkov's The Silver Bone, the first in his trilogy of Kyiv Mysteries, and Peter Pomerantsev's How to Win an Information War are both out now. And Peter's book is also Radio 4's Book of the Week this week. Many thanks to today's studio engineer Tim Heffer. Next week, Adam Rutherford will be here exploring the diversity within the East and Southeast Asian diaspora. But for now, thank you and goodbye.
Start the Week was presented by Tom Sutcliffe and produced by Katie Hickman. And you can find previous episodes of the programme on BBC Sounds. We'll hear part 1 of Peter Pomerantsev's How to Win an Information War in just a moment. Before the Book of the Week, though, a word about tomorrow evening's 6:30 comedy.
Preheat oven, gas mark 9, pour audience into palm of hand, ding, dinner is served. That's my recipe.
Fresh comic chaos from Tim Key and Tom Bastin.
Your head's all swollen up.
Pardon me?
It's swollen right up. It's like an onion on a cocktail stick.
Using poetic license when it comes to poetry.
I sometimes write poems about love in the community, that sort of thing. Sometimes snooker.
Featuring Katie Wicks, Stephen Merchant, Pollyanna Fope and Morgana Robinson.
Looks like he's been rolled down the dough while the lights were off.
She's got away with words, Lord, I'll give her that.
Bang on.
Pardon me?
Tim Key's Poetry Programme. Tuesday nights, new 6:30 comedy on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
And so now our new Book of the Week, Peter Pomerantsev's portrait of Sefton Delmer, who was a leading figure in the propaganda war against the Nazis. Alan Cox is the reader.
Everybody's knocking in and doing their job, wearing a great big smile. We're gonna hang out the washing of the every night. Have you any dirty washing on here?
He's tall, ripped in opposite directions, pulled this way and that. Can 10-year-old Sefton Delmer even tell which is the real him? He is the only British boy in a German school in the opening months of World War I. In the packed hall, his normally calm headmaster is screeching about the British, who have brought this war upon peace-loving Germany and its peace-loving Kaiser. The British are jealous of Germany's new wealth and expanding territories. These assassins have plotted to encircle us, and now it is a moment for death and glory. Sefton's friends hesitant. Traitor. After school, they surround him, and one sets upon him with his fists. Every morning, assemblies grow more fervent. They march round the hall crying, "God, Kaiser, Fatherland." Sefton must march too, and although he knows it isn't right, he can't help but be thrilled by these hymns to German gunsmiths, hammering the steel-hard German heart. Who, in this moment, is the real Sefton Delmer? The one singing German war songs, or the one muttering resistance in English under his breath? This splitting of the self would become the source of Delmer's skill. He would grow up to become a genius of propaganda, famed for his ability to leave his own personality behind, climb inside the enemy's mind, and play tricks on them from the inside. But this quality would also be his greatest vulnerability. In 1929, after years away from Germany, 24-year-old Delmer returned as the chief Berlin correspondent of the Daily Express. In Weimar, Berlin, he found that his fluid identity was an advantage that would help him penetrate the backstage of the Nazi propaganda show. When in February he first saw Hitler speak, he was unimpressed. The Sportpalast, Berlin's biggest indoor venue, could hold 14,000 people. Now, when Delmer sauntered in past the stormtroopers, it was half empty. Hitler was on stage, flushed, yelling about oranges. "We Germans must not eat oranges. We must consume no fruit, no food which we have not grown ourselves." A crackpot, Delmer thought, and walked out again. But by September 1930, the Nazis were the second biggest party in Parliament, and the second time Delmer heard him speak, he paid more attention. Sitting as close as possible in the packed hall, he noted Hitler's popping blue eyes, how sweat seeped into his cheap suit, how he stirred the normally prim middle classes into aggressive exaltation. At the end, the crowd sang, "Deutschland, Deutschland über alles." This was the moment Delmer decided to penetrate the Nazis' inner circle. I determined to get to know this miracle man, study the secret of his appeal, and find out what use he was going to make of it. In February 1931, Ernst Röhm was inspecting his stormtroopers at the Sportpalast. He gave the Nazi salute as he entered, and his men returned the Sieg Heil. Behind him, his aide-de-camp also saluted. The aide-de-camp was Sefton Delmer. Acting as Röhm's assistant was a condition of attending the meeting. This was a private event, no journalists allowed. But Röhm wanted Delmer there to prove to the English that the stormtroopers were not thugs, but a disciplined fighting force, to ensure that the English and French didn't make too much of a fuss as Hitler came closer to power. Soon, he would want to integrate the stormtroopers into the German army, and that needed approval from the victorious powers in World War I. For Delmer, it was a chance to gain the Nazi leader's trust. You can hear an actor's delight in his memoirs. I squared back my shoulders, turned down the corners of my mouth in correct disdain, and became Röhm's extra ADC. Orderlies rushed up, clicked heels and saluted. I saluted back, rather more negligently, with arm half bent, as befitted my rank. It was wonderful fun. What precisely was fun about it? Just the thrill of getting away with it? Or did a part of him enjoy the role? We marched down the aisle. The huge arena was crammed with stormtroopers standing rigidly to attention, row upon row, 3,500 of them. As he passed these pale, drawn men, he could see both the power and the vulnerability of the Nazi experiment. They came from all parts of society. Some were there from patriotic motives. Others were hungry for loot and high positions. Many were unemployed. The Nazis aimed to forge a unified people's community from this fractured rabble. Delmer's goal would become to divide them. As they drove away, Röhm chuckled. "You make a fine ADC, Herr Delmer. Why don't you come to Munich and join us in our magnificent new brown house?" Delmer's act had worked. Do you think I could talk with Herr Hitler? Of course. I shall arrange it myself. A week later, he was on his way to Munich. Röhm greeted Delmer and took him on a tour around the building. It was calculated to make a grand impression on him. SS men crouched over maps in a mock war game scenario of invading Poland, and maps showing how many thousands of stormtroopers were located in every town. Hitler finally appeared in cheap shoes and a double-breasted suit. He had sallow skin and overly arranged hair. He reminded Delmer of ex-soldier traveling salesmen, humiliated veterans struggling to settle into a civilian life. Before Delmer could speak, he launched into a tirade about how terrible the French were. Unlike the English, of course, Britain's interests were similar to Germany's. They were both Nordic peoples. They should ally. That the only thing Germany wanted was a free hand in the East. There were many occasions on which I talked with Hitler, Delmer later recalled, and every time the same thing happened. I would put a question, he would reply, and his reply would swell out into an oration. He would be shouting as though he had the Sports Palace crowd before him, not just a solitary British reporter. Then, as quickly as the oration swelled, it was switched off, and Hitler departed for his next meeting. But Delmer had enough for his exclusive. Herr Hitler talks to the Daily Express, ran the headline on May the 4th. The article communicated to the English public Hitler's offer of a British-German alliance. It also made clear that Delmer thought Hitler was destined for great things. He predicted with his rise Germany would soon join the ranks of Europe's fascist powers. The article must have pleased the Nazi leadership. Later that year, Delmer got another exclusive one-on-one with Hitler. In order to ingratiate himself further with the Nazi elites, Delmer invited them to his parties. He invited dancing girls and princes to make the fascists feel as important and relaxed as possible. He even bought a giant Bechstein piano for Hitler's press attaché, Ernst Putzi Hanfstaengl, to play. Röhm would pass out drunk, face down on the dinner table. Goering would play with Delmer's pet parrot, laughing as it pooped on his white dinner jacket. And while Delmer was busy wooing the Nazis, they were also busy wooing him. Röhm aimed to put British minds at ease about the Nazis. He assured Delmer that the anti-Semitism shouldn't be taken too seriously. It was just another act to get more voters. Delmer now realized he thought he was a British spy. Whether it was their hope he could be a conduit to the British Secret Services, his articles, the parties, the piano, or just the way Delmer put Hitler at ease, the Nazis chose him as the only non-Nazi journalist to accompany Hitler in the crucial second round of the presidential election of April 1932. On April the 6th, Delmer wrote in the Express, "My ears are still ringing, but that is not due to the roar of the motors of the great triple-engined airplane in which Hitler, his most intimate staff, and myself have been flying for the last 12 hours, from one meeting place to another. It is due to the wild cheering and enthusiastic singing of the overwhelming crowds." About 200,000 people had seen Hitler in one day as he flew between 4 cities, each vying with the other in the fanatical fervor of Hitler worship. But the influence worked both ways. The sincere adulation mesmerized him, Delmer wrote on the eve of World War II, that he lived on the emotion and mass hysteria